Russia insists there's nothing aggressive in its renewed Arctic patrols, but a return of the country's military presence in the chilly waters around the North Pole will be viewed with deep suspicion. And this is the reason. Nearly a quarter of Russia's oil and gas reserves lie off its northern coasts. Russian companies actively developing operations in the region, because hiding beneath the Arctic's frozen beauty lies a quarter of the world's entire oil and gas reserves. Global warming and melting ice mean those reserves could be opened up within decades, which has launched an international race to stake a claim. The Russians starting with the planting of a flag on the ocean floor of the North Pole, a scientific triumph that's worrying other nations for reasons unconnected to research. Under international law, the 5 countries bordering the Arctic each control a 200-mile economic zone stretching from the edge of their continental shelves. A disputed Russian claim pushes that territory all the way to the North Pole.
Russian military presence in the Arctic basically sends 2 messages. One is to the whole world that Russia is going to lay its claim to the rich oil reserves under the Arctic. And secondly, it is a signal to the Russian people that Russia is strong militarily and is going to build up its military strength further on.
Russia's Arctic claims have infuriated the Canadians, who have announced their own military plans for the polar region, while scientists from Denmark, representing Greenland, are seeking to establish links to the North Pole through an underwater mountain range. So it is the Arctic, vast, remote and inhospitable, has triggered a territorial struggle unseen since the days of colonialism. And with the addition of a Russian maritime force, now even more dangerous. Richard Bestic, Al Jazeera.
Well, earlier we spoke to Jonathan Neal, defence analyst at London-based Royal United Services Institute, and he told us this exercise was caused by Russia's frustration at its standing on the world stage.
They want to make it very clear that they are back as a superpower. That the old times, the last 20 years, when the Russian Navy was more or less absent from most of the international waters, is over. The timing, however, is interesting. We have a new president in Moscow, and everyone assumed that President Medvedev would be a very different man than his predecessor. Well, the message from Moscow seems to be that it's business as usual. The equipment which the Russians have been deploying, both in the air and now on the sea, is actually very old equipment. Most of it dates back 20 to 25 years ago at the time of the Soviet Union. It is of no direct challenge to the military capabilities of the US Navy, but it is a political message, and it comes with a very serious political promise made in Moscow to invest some of the oil receipts which the Russian state is now enjoying in the modernization of the Russian military. These issues are actually quite serious. It's one thing to dismiss this is just a political gesture, as the Americans seem to be doing. It's quite another if you're a Norwegian or Canadian and suddenly discover after 20 years Russian ships on your doorstep. In the Arctic, in the North Pole, what we have is precisely a territorial dispute. As the ice melts as a result of global warming, we are now discovering the kind of territorial disputes that nobody paid much attention to in the North Pole. I don't believe that we're witnessing a beginning of a new Cold War in Europe, but clearly what we are witnessing is a sense of frustration in Russia about not being taken seriously or about not having Russian interests being taken into account as Moscow sees it. So in a way, the situation is grave. It is an indication that after 20 years since the collapse of communism, we have still not managed to establish a method for dealing with the Russians on a civilized way without saber rattling. And it is also an indication that Russia, now awash with cash as a result of high energy prices, is utterly determined to return to its important military position in the world.